I'm Alicia.
And I'm Alina.
And we are here with the Women's March Minnesota doing a spotlight on the Immigrant Law Center here in Minnesota. So I'm going to flip the camera around here in just a second and introduce you to our three fabulous panelists that will be able to answer any questions you have and share a little bit more about why they do the work that they do and how you can get involved if you're interested. Anything that you want to add?
That's about it. We'll be asking questions.
And if you have any questions as you're watching, go ahead and type them in the comments below, and we'll be able to answer those questions for you towards the end of our time here together. All right, so let's turn the camera around. All right, so here we are, the Immigrant Law Center. We've got Zamzam, a legal assistant here, and we've got John.
Hello.
The director, and then Sandra, the receptionist. So we'll go ahead and get started. Alina's going to ask some questions, and then we'll go from there.
John, would you like to give us an overview of the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota?
First of all, many thanks to the Women's March, to everybody who made that happen. That was awesome. And also for this great opportunity to talk about our organization. Our work is more important than ever. My name's John Keller. I'm the Executive Director of the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota. I've been here with ILCM for 18 years, coming up on 19. This was my first job out of college. I was thrilled to have a chance to work with people from all over the world. The Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota is the state's largest provider of free legal services to immigrants and refugees, people who need help with immigration applications, anything from becoming a U.S. citizen to getting a work authorization card to reuniting family members. We work with people from over 100 different countries. We have 5 offices across the state, 2 in the metro and 3 in greater Minnesota, and all of our services are free for people who are low income, so have to qualify, and then we do the legal work that really helps change lives. In addition to the legal work, we do public policy, so we work on state and federal public policy that affects immigrants and refugees. We love to be working on positive pieces of public policy, but oftentimes we are pushing back on negative issues as well, both at the state and federal levels. And then education. We do a lot of work across the state helping people understand this complex topic, but we also train professionals, social workers, judges, faith communities about what's happening with immigration.
And can you tell us, John, about the overview of the impact that the recent round of executive orders have had on Muslim, Latino, and mixed status families?
Yeah, the impact of the executive orders for people who've been following in the news can't be understated, to be honest. Like I said, I've been doing this for almost 2 decades, and there has not been a period of time in my practice where so many people are as frightened, as unsettled as is happening right now. And I know that sounds hard to believe, but it's truly the case. I think you'll hear some of that from Zamzam and Sandra in their daily lives. To give examples, so really once the election was settled, my first time doing Facebook Live was the very next day. We did a Facebook Live event in Spanish for people who believed that Donald Trump was going to show up in person on January 20th to deport them and their kids. The level of fear and targeting that had gone on throughout the campaign resulted in the impossible for many people who believed that the U.S. was above that kind of scapegoating of immigrants and Muslims. So it really was the culmination of a year and a half of targeting and fear. And now what we've seen is from election to inauguration, and now immediately after inauguration, the putting into place memos and practices that are carrying out some of the things he talked about. A Muslim ban, as you remember, he said over and over again on the campaign trail was what he was going to do. There was a brief period where he said he wasn't going to do it, and then, of course, on January 27th, we saw an unconstitutional, ill-advised, poorly reviewed ban come out with immediate impact on the large Somali community in Minnesota and people from all over the world who were impacted by it. We at Immigrant Law Center ended up working on the case of a young girl who's 4 years old. Her name is Mushkad. She was from Somalia, living apart from her mom almost her entire life. This story was picked up on the front page of the the Washington Post. And it took like an amazing amount of work. Us, the Center for New Americans, there were probably 10 lawyers or more working on this case for a 4-year-old girl who just days before she was to be reunited with her mom, a permanent resident Somali woman who came as a refugee, was denied the ability to get on a plane. Both U.S. senators, as well as a large law firm, all of this power went into trying to get one little girl reunited with her mom. And it was really the beginning of the all-out litigation that happened across the country. Of course, Minnesota's Attorney General used Mushkad's story as an example of how unfair and religious discrimination really was at the center of this case. And fortunately, from that point forward, the Ninth Circuit has been able to stop the order. We, of course, are living in anticipation and worry about the reinstated order and its impact. So that's one impact. We've been presenting in mosques. We've been presenting in different community groups about the impact. We set up a hotline for people who were too scared to travel or who had somebody who was still abroad. We set up special workshops at the Brian Coyle Center to really give people a chance to get their questions answered. A lot of people who weren't even citizens of the countries, but who happened to be Muslim, were scared about traveling because there's a fear additional countries could be added. So the ripples and ripples of impact were pretty intense. And still there's a lot of fear, even though it's on hold. For the Latino community, our work has been, again, from the very beginning of post-election, we've probably done 25 to 30 workshops, and most of those workshops are trying to help people understand what their rights are, how do they defend themselves, and then finally when the executive orders came out, really detailing massive increases in ICE agents, in enforcement agents. It again was the culmination of a promise to create a dramatic deportation force, which was another campaign promise. And we're living through that process right now. People who are making very hard plans about what to do with their US-born children if they end up being deported, talking to schools about who else is authorized to pick up their kids, faith communities talking about setting up sanctuary for people who are too scared to go out of their houses. So it really has this very, very dramatic, sad impact on a lot of people's lives, including children who are bracing for the worst.
And about the little girl Mushka that you spoke of, the 4-year-old, what was the outcome of her case?
Yeah, so we really encourage people to look at, on our Facebook page, Immigrant Law Center's Facebook page, the story is there, the photographs are there of the first night she got here. I was lucky enough to be there with the Washington Post reporter, or the photographer. It was amazing seeing this mother, I'm gonna try to not get emotional, see her daughter for the first time in almost 4 years. I think the picture that I'll never forget and seeing it was the mom helping her brush her teeth for the first time, and just realizing how monumental that was, that this little girl had grown up without her mom, and who, through this really miracle of concerted efforts that never should have had to happen, let's be honest. A 4-year-old girl, it is ludicrous to think that our safety in any way was challenged by admitting this girl. But so she's here, she's with her mom, she's with her 2 big sisters, who were absolutely over the moon to have her with her. So we're thrilled about that.
And I know, Zamzam, you will be telling us a lot, but before we switch, I want to ask John, is the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota doing any work with Minneapolis or St. Paul as sanctuary cities? and with any congregations, sanctuaries?
Yeah, great question. As you know, both cities have very strong separation ordinances that have been in place for now close to 13 or 14 years. And the important, truth about those ordinances is it's all about community policing, really making it clear that both St. Paul and Minneapolis local police are concentrated on what they should be concentrated on, which is stopping crime. Immigration law is civil. Most people don't realize that when we say it. And number two, it's federal. None of the local police departments get money to do immigration enforcement. That's part of what the most recent Trump executive order would like to change. There's a piece in it that seeks to deputize local police departments to do immigration enforcement. There will be local police departments that do that. We've spoken directly with elected officials and police chiefs from both. I've testified in a couple of committees. We are certain and working to make sure that doesn't happen in the Twin Cities. But we also are a statewide project. So in areas that it's harder for the mainstream community to understand, or where the moment of accepting immigrants is more new, we have our work cut out for us, even in a place like Minnesota, of really helping people understand that the immigration process is totally and should remain under the jurisdiction of immigration and not local police departments. A big piece of our work, I'll just add, is working with women who've been victims of crime. Immigrant women who themselves or their children have been victims of domestic violence or sexual assault, who are oftentimes too scared to call the police because of this fear that it could lead to their own deportation. We've worked for almost 20 years to help our communities and help the police department talk to one another and build that trust up, so that if somebody's a victim, they can call without fear and get protection. And we've made really great progress to change that equation, to mix immigration enforcement and local police departments' roles will make every victim fearful that that phone call could lead to deportation. And that has happened in places like Arizona and other parts of the country. So we want to prevent that from happening.
And would that be by executive order? Would that be something that the House and Senate would?
So the ability to deputize or to do immigration enforcement is already in the statutes. So it's a piece that was happening before across the country under President Bush, under President Obama. Eventually, it was suspended. So it's there. It's not something new that needs to be approved. That's why it can be kind of blinked on pretty quickly. It is not mandatory, so jurisdictions will opt in. But we are pretty certain that there'll be incentives. We've already seen threats toward sanctuary cities if they don't cooperate. And we think that there'll be both incentives and threats to try to make as many police departments cooperate as possible. They've called it a force multiplier, and it's one of the ways that they can try to arrest and detain and deport people without dramatically blowing up the federal budget. You asked about faith communities. I'm very proud of Isaiah, which is another great organization in town, and their leadership on helping to have conversations about churches and synagogues who wish to explore what would it take, what would it mean if they housed somebody who was in fear of deportation. There's over a dozen communities already that have said that they will house somebody and protect them and their families from deportation if necessary. We don't know what the future holds, but we're grateful that those churches and faith communities have come forward. There is a long tradition of faith communities being involved in civil rights struggles, and we think that this is a continuation of, even within immigration in the early 80s when people were fleeing civil wars in Central America that the United States was very involved in creating in the first place. That was where the modern sanctuary movement started, and a lot of churches across the country got involved. We think the same thing will happen.
My synagogue just is in the process of becoming a sanctuary temple or synagogue. Can you answer, I'm curious as to whether or not you see a need for more sanctuary congregations, whether it's mosques,
Yeah.
synagogues, churches, given the new climate that we're
Yeah.
in the midst of?
It's a good question. I think that there's two things that are happening. One is the power of people of faith, motivated by faith, to call out the inhumanity of what we're seeing. And the way that that's happening right now is to say we are opposed to making everyone a criminal, which is basically what these executive orders do. They throw out all of the priorities of the past and basically say, if you're here without papers, doesn't matter if you've been here 15 or 20 or 25 years, it doesn't matter if you have U.S. citizen children, it doesn't even matter if you're disabled or your children are disabled, you are now a priority. And that's so beyond what I think morally people expect of us as a government. And it does raise a question of what is the moral response. And so I think the more, whether it be organized faith communities and across the spectrum of faiths, or individuals who say, you know, we will stand up for our neighbor, that kind of response is extremely powerful. And I don't think we can have too few of them, particularly when we're looking at, you know, projections that are staggering in terms of the number of people who could be targeted. And I think it won't ever protect everybody, but I think it also raises the question for everyone in that church or in that synagogue about why are we doing this? Like, why is this a question of faith? How does faith interact with laws, and how does morality interact with laws? So I think that we're seeing the beginning of it. I think that we've seen the power of sanctuary in the past as a force of social change, and I think that will continue. There's already people taking sanctuary who have had no other option and whose cases are very sympathetic.
Thank you. And Sam, would you like to tell us a little bit about your background, what your role is at the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota?
Yep, I'm a legal assistant at the Immigrant Law Center. I started as an intern back in last February, actually. And then I started working with ILCM in September as a legal assistant. I work predominantly with the the Somali refugees and immigrants. Majority of them are newcomers, so they need help with filing applications for their green card and small things like that. But and we also, I also help with naturalizing, so helping them apply for citizenship, and like throughout the community, just answer questions that I know I can, give them the best response possible, especially with what's going on right now. There's an increase of just, oh my God, what's happening? Can I do this? Is this okay? And there's not much out there for, especially the Somali community. Now there is a growing response in Somalia, because most of the people that are affected are the refugees who recently came, and some that came a while ago but still have families back at the refugee camps, or those that are filing visas for their children or family members. So when majority of the things are in English, the ban is in English, the resources are in English, it was difficult for them to understand what is happening, and they were believing all the rumors and didn't have legitimate facts to go based on. But now there's a growing resources that are in Somali, and the office is actually providing a lot of things that are going to help them in terms of the language. And yeah, so that is what I do.
Are you seeing a much larger influx of inquiries then, as people are seeking accurate information that in Somali, so they can really have a clear understanding as it changes week by week here at the Law Center?
Yeah, there's even people that have already filed applications for, or I'm barely at the office now because I started school. So every day, whenever I do come to the office, there's like 6 or 7 voicemails of people just saying, hey Zamzam, please give me a call back. I have an urgent question, and it'll just be, you just filed this application for me. Is it gonna get approved? What's gonna happen? My siblings are still at the refugee camp. What's happening? So yeah, there's an increase of just confusion and fear and loss of hope in a lot of people.
Zamzam, are you meeting other Muslim individuals from some of the other countries that experienced the sort of 7-country initial ban that the new administration imposed? And can you share a little bit about any of those experiences?
Yeah, I go to St. Catherine University, and our MSA, the Muslim Student Association, recently had their first gathering for the semester, and we had the entire staff and faculty at St. Kate's come and show support of the Muslims. And there's a growing number of Muslim students at St. Catherine University, and most of them are international students. There's not a lot of people that are directly affected from those 7 countries. But I think the biggest problem is just being like secondhand affected. I don't even know if that's a real thing, but like having that Muslim ban in place and having it give a lot of people some sort of a permission to do a lot of negativity and say negative things, and just it allows a lot of unjust things to go through, right? So it's not so much as them being affected by the ban, but like what the ban has brought out of people.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, there's a lot of positivity. An order that was put in place to kind of separate and create this whole division within the United States actually has done the opposite. So there is negativity, but there's also this huge support from everybody, and you have people joining hands, doing rallies, protests, because I mean it's not just the Muslim ban. It's not only affecting the immigrants, the undocumented. It's like a humanity issue, and it's really nice. And you kind of forget that you're the victim at one point. Because you are seeing people that are affected, and then you see this huge group of support, and you just feel the need to like join that support, and you all feel like you're supporting the same thing, so you forget you're the victim. So I mean, yeah, there's that positivity that I try to like hold on to.
And you would say you've experienced more of that unification and that positivity than negative backlashes?
Yeah, I mean, when you're here, right, when you're not at the refugee camps, when you're not the one who has, you're not the mom of 6 kids who has to worry about where you're going to get your next meal because apparently you cannot come to America for a better life, and you're here, the best way to stay positive is just seeing that support, and all these immigrant attorneys that are working for free, staying at the airports for days to help people get justice and just help people come through and live their life. So that, I guess, when you're here, that's a good thing that you're seeing.
And as a student at the College of St. Catherine and as a legal assistant here at the Immigrant Law Center of Minnesota, are you uniquely in a position of seeing your classmates who maybe are afraid to go home for, say, a break if they don't know if they'll be allowed to come back? And has your college experienced that, and has your college taken a stance?
Yeah, we have a lot of Muslim students and African students that are here on a student visa, and they're international students. So with this not even having anything to do with student visas, they're scared. They are here alone and going back, like summer's coming up, and there's a constant talk of, oh, it's not just those 7 countries that's affected. I don't know if I can go home. So it's like, I think is Sudan one of the countries?
Yeah.
I think we have a few students from South Sudan. So it's like, I don't know if I could go back home. And they are constantly getting phone calls from their family members. And, but yeah, with the St. Catherine, we have a huge amount of support. You will see the president just walking around campus, checking on people, and we have offices where you will find large numbers of students just standing there discussing what's happening, constant presentations on who Muslims are, what refugees are, because I think there's a lot of people who don't understand what it is like to be a refugee, and I think our president is one of those people. For people who are running from terrorism, from famine, from just issues and war, he's put them in a place of like saying, oh, they're the problem, you know what, so let's just push them to the side since they're the problem. So I think a lot of people don't understand that, and with St. Kate's we're having students present that to the community, our community as a school, and the more you have people understand, I think it's the less ignorance you have. And St. Catherine is a predominantly Catholic school, and so it's really, I mean, sometimes like when I am home or like within the community, they're like, hey, so what is it like to be at a Catholic school? You're a Muslim. It's like being home, because everybody's so supportive, and it's like when you want to go ahead and base your ideology on religion, there's so much commonality and so much positivity instead of the negative things others would like to pick and choose.
That's great to hear. And can you tell us a little bit about what a typical day is like when you're working at the Immigrant Law Center in terms of taking people through the process of getting their their visas, whether it's work or study, or the work that you do?
I mostly work with helping them get their green cards or citizenship sometimes. And do you want to know what it's like now or just before? Before. Now there's a lot of hesitation on some, and then some want to rush it. And it's like, I need to get my green card. Can you apply? Can you just fill these out and please send them out right now? And some are just, some citizens, I had, I think, last week or 2 weeks ago. Time is going slow and fast at the same time. There's a couple who called me and they wanted to do their they left a voicemail and they called them back and they wanted to do their citizenship, but they were hesitant. So they're like, oh, we don't want to get the light on us now. We don't want the administration to know anything right now about us at all. And they have nothing to worry about. So it's like it did create a state of confusion for a lot of people. So it's a little hectic, especially with me being back in school. Mm-hmm. But it's also rewarding. Like I said, like earlier, it makes me forget that I am, I'm affected by this because I'm helping those that are also affected in a way. So yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, it's rewarding.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
I appreciate your first-hand insights.
Thank you.
Sandra, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and your role at ILCM too?
Okay. So my name is Sandra. I started working here about 2 years ago. I am a former client of ILCM, and everything started after my mom lost her job at a janitorial services company. Unfortunately, she was undocumented at the time, and she was not knowledgeable about ILCM. She was not knowledgeable about the law in the United States. Previously to being fired and for us being here, we lived in Mexico for about 5 years without our parents. They were in the United States. And while they were in the United States, my mom was a cashier at a Mexican store. She was assaulted various times because they wanted to get some money, and she had to fight one guy who had a knife. Because of this, she didn't call the police. She was afraid that she was going to be deported if she told the police. So she kept it quiet. She went back to Mexico. She brought us to the United States. And then after a while, when she was fired from her job, that's when, because they had a union in their work job, and the union brought John and ILCM to the place where she worked, and she was able to talk to one of the representatives of ILCM, and she found out that she qualified for a U visa. During that time, it was very hard because my mom, obviously undocumented, my father undocumented, and my brother, sister, and I undocumented as well. It was time for us to start thinking about college, but at the time it wasn't something that we had in our minds. We all had to work. We all had to work very hard. We all had to work in jobs that obviously didn't pay enough money. And I think back of how ILCM has impacted my life. And I'm sorry, I get very emotional. And I don't like to think about the what if my mom would have known about ILCM. I like to think about all the positive things that have happened in my life, such as, I'm sorry, been able to go to school, and now I got a degree in liberal arts from Minneapolis Community and Technical College, and I'm about to go to Oxford College next semester, so I'm very happy about that. So it's quite hard to think that the President of the United States doesn't like you and doesn't want you to be here. So as a Latino community, we definitely feel targeted. Thank you. We definitely feel targeted, but with all the positivity that we have around, such as communities, churches, ILCM still helps with everything that we are doing, such as U-Visas, like my mom, TPS of other countries, Somalia, El Salvador, and others, citizenship, helping with refugees. So I am very grateful to be here and to be able to provide and help ILCM to grow and to be able to get those communities and those people together and have those families reunite. I never thought of me going back to Mexico and seeing my grandparents. It never crossed my mind, but now we're going back to Mexico back and forth once in a while to see my grandparents. So that's very, very exciting. So I'm very grateful.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask what you intend to study when you get to Oxford?
Well, I am kind of debating between social work and going to political science and then eventually go to law school, but I am very excited for either or. So yeah.
Wonderful. And on a day-to-day basis, what has it been like around here answering the phones?
Oh, it's definitely
inauguration.
Yeah, it's a little bit hard. We have definitely a lot of voicemails every day that I come in. The first time for when the election happened, it was typically around 15 to 20 messages. Now we're receiving around 30 to 40 messages, voicemail messages. Yeah, so definitely the calls are a lot, and it's a lot of stress at the same time. But we definitely have to think about the positive things that we're doing and the positive things that we're doing with people like me. To give them the chance to go to college, to give them the chance to reunify with their family members. So that definitely is something that is very rewarding, knowing that every day is a little step towards something better. So yeah.
Wonderful. And Sandra, can you tell us a little bit about what it entails to become a DACA student with the ILCM, what that process looks like?
So for people who want to apply for DACA, currently there's a lot of should I or should I not? And we have calls every single day of people whether they should apply for DACA or should not. We're still taking DACA calls every day. We're still trying to have people come in and apply for the DACA. Doesn't matter if it's renewing, doesn't matter if it's initial. All of the people are more than welcome to apply. It doesn't seem at this moment that they're going to take an action, but we're definitely letting people know of what could happen if DACA ended. And although it's very fearful, we definitely need to push through. We definitely need to rally, and we definitely need to keep working towards better. And I think that as long as, DACA kids, the only thing that they want to do is go to college and have a job and live their lives just as regular as any other person. Most DACA people, sometimes they don't even know that they weren't undocumented. So I think it is very important to have that conversation and know that DACA students are just like anyone else. Yeah, and that they're human beings, just as refugees, just as people who come here because of war, because of gang and violence and poverty, basically. So.
Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Who would like to take this question? If we're dispelling some myths about what is a refugee, what is an immigrant, for people who throw out terms like they're all illegals or other horrible things, who wants to take on those very basic sort of demystifying?
I can take a crack at it. Part of my job as the director is I do a lot of work out in the community talking about, you know, what are the common misperceptions and myths, and you know, I remember I was in a church somewhere in greater Minnesota, and somebody stood up and said that exact same thing, like, why are we letting in all these illegal refugees? And I had to take a deep breath and, you know, compose myself and use it as a teaching moment and just step back and say, okay, you know, first of all, to enter as a refugee, you know, means that something horrible has happened in your home country. You have been forced to flee. Almost always you've spent years in a refugee camp, and you are the exception, you know, the less than 1% that actually get a chance to find a new life in the developing world. And from the moment you get approved, you and your family, and enter the United States, you enter with the blessing of the United States. You've been screened, you've been vetted through every possible intelligence agency the U.S. has, from Homeland Security to the Department of State, to the FBI, to the Counterterrorism Agency. So the level of vetting makes them, you know, this very small group of people, relatively speaking, who have probably endured some of the worst things in humanity and have been waiting in a queue. I heard somebody say the other day that the average wait time for refugees now is 20 years, which is, you know, shocking and unfathomable. And the other thing that we remind people of is that, you know, most refugees are refugees in the country right next to where the fighting has happened, and they never get out. You know, they are stuck in the next door country that truly is providing a level of care and hopefully safety. They're the true first responders in the whole global scheme of refugees. We accept on any given year about 70,000 to maybe 80,000 nationally, so those are national numbers. In Minnesota, it's somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 annually. So a very minute number of the total number of people who immigrate to the United States. It tends to be sort of backwards. People right now are so worked up about refugees because of what we've just been through and because there's been violence. But the reality is, and we've posted some of this information on our Facebook page, is that, you know, there's been no prosecution for terrorism based on any national from the 7 affected countries since 1975. No one has been killed in the United States by a refugee from those countries. The chances of, you know, that happening are 1 in 3.6 billion, according to the Cato Institute. You know, we're more likely to be hit by lightning or to win the Powerball than to have, you know, something terrible happen to us because of a refugee. So that's one thing I would say, you know, in terms of people who are undocumented, it's the term that we prefer. We don't call somebody who does illegal stock trading an illegal stock trader. We make mistakes. People who are here have also usually come because they're seeking a better life. The fact that they've been here, the average length of time that somebody's been undocumented in the United States now is close to 15 years. And the reason that they're stuck in this limbo is because they have no way, on the one hand, to get legal status, most of them. And on the other hand, they are finding work. They are working very, very hard, often 2 or more jobs, doing things that make us a stronger economy, a stronger community. And so we sort of give them permission to be here by giving them jobs, by having them help us make money and make our communities more prosperous. At the same time, we're putting a stop sign up saying they're not welcome. And that's really this public policy debate we've been engaged in for a long time in my work. A lot of people don't know this, but we've worked for the last 11 years with the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce, with the hotel and hospitality industry, with the agricultural community and lobbying agencies, the Minnesota milk producers. I'm a former dairy farm kid. We would not have food or milk in this country if it weren't for immigrants. And very large percentage of that workforce is undocumented. And those folks know it, who represent those industries. Here in Minnesota, a study just came out from the Humphrey Institute that we need not only our current levels of immigration, but we need to increase that by 4.5 times over the next couple of decades in order to keep our basic economy at the level of prosperity that we have right now. So it's really aligning what we all know, or the vast majority know, needs to happen, which is a legalization program for people who've been here, who can pass background checks and who can apply, and connecting that with our own self-interest to make all of us have both a safer community, but also a community that's more stable and people don't have to live in fear.
So I have a quick thing to add. So all of the things you were just talking about are on your website. Because you mentioned 3 very key things that our current president and administration are sort of portraying to the media and the world, that refugee individuals are dangerous, and that's why we need to have this ban in effect, which is the exact opposite of the truth. So I guess it's an alternative fact. That we need to not only allow people to come into the country, but to increase that by 4 times, so that way we can continue to have the economy that we have and have our needs be met. Yet the administration is saying we have to stop this because they're taking all of the quote-unquote American jobs. So again, I guess an alternative fact. And then I know I lost the 3rd piece, but there's another one that you had mentioned as well, and it just is infuriating that the reality is the exact opposite of what we're being told. So people can find out more information and facts on your website. And what's your website again?
Yeah, so our website is ilcm.org, ImmigrantLawCenterMinnesota.org. I really also encourage people to like our Facebook page, Immigrant Law Center Minnesota. We are putting updated information up usually twice a day or more if necessary. Sometimes action alerts. We have an action alert up today. But the important thing, one of the messages every time I speak, people always want to know what to do, and the first thing is to educate yourself. This is not an impossible topic. This is a theme in a substantive area where we win when we know the facts, and the facts are on our side. This is not even a Democrat-Republican thing. This is, as I mentioned, for us at Immigrant Law Center, we spent the last 11 years working with an amazing number of business interests that we usually don't agree with on anything, or very few things, as well as labor unions from the AFL-CIO to SEIU to faith groups. All of the major faith groups are supportive of immigration reform, as well as grassroots groups. So, recent polling continues to show that the American public supports a legalization plan and not mass deportations. Once again, the American public is out in front of where our politicians are, and the executive orders, the work that Immigrant Law Center does, all of our legal-based defense of communities, defense of individuals is important, but we also need to be working as a team to change the rhetoric politically and neighbor to neighbor about the value of immigrants and the fact that they're not scary, that refugees do not mean terrorists. And in fact, we need to get to know one another and do a better job of welcoming them, if for no other reason than, we need them to be taking care of us. As more and more people age out of the workforce and are getting care, that care is often being provided both by replacement workers who were born somewhere else, or their kids were, or are the kids of somebody born somewhere else, or the actual caregivers in nursing home and assisted care, particularly in the metro, or even the physicians themselves are foreign born. So.
How else can people help the Immigrant Law Center and help the cause of supporting immigrants and refugees in Minnesota?
Yeah, two things. So one is, the education that I talked about, and it's there. It's easy to access either on our website or on our Facebook. The second is taking action once you sort of feel comfortable. We'll be sending out action alerts, but the reality is on this issue, I do believe that all of Minnesota's federal delegation will support immigration reform. None of them are so diametrically opposed that we can't use the allies and the coalitions that we have to get there, but they also need to hear from people. They need to hear, number one, that they don't agree with the direction that we're going right now when it comes to immigrants and refugees. I haven't used the app myself, but I just saw an app that will remind you every day to make a phone call to one of your elected officials. So it's out there. If you're not app savvy, we can give you the number for the Congressional Switchboard and just add it to your to-do list. I tell people that the phone call that you make to your representative and your senators usually takes about 30 seconds. And the person on the other end is usually somebody who's 20 to 22 years old, who's just keeping a check mark. And those are dramatic things we can do to let our local officials know that the direction that we're currently headed, this very punitive, very dark, very enforcement-first direction, is not the direction of the United States. And then lastly, in this moment, as we as a nonprofit begin to try to respond, we're doing everything we were doing before the election. At the same time, we're working very hard to build additional support. We need support. We need financial contributions. You can do monthly contributions. We encourage people to, if they have the ability to do joint fundraising, or if there's an association or club or faith community they're with, to have a bigger impact. We've been so grateful for the support that's come in already. So that's the thing that I think helps people understand what we're up against is, even though deportation is a trial-based setting, you do not have a right to a government-appointed lawyer. You may be facing torture. You may be facing, very dire consequences if you're forcibly removed from the country, but you don't have a right to appointed counsel. You have a right to an attorney, at no cost to the government. So we are, nonprofits and private attorneys are the counsel people have a right to, but without additional support, we can help a small number of people. And we're really trying to ramp up our capacity to help people who've been here for 15 years, who have U.S. citizen children, who can fight their deportation, and to not lose hope. So any and all contributions in that regard are super helpful and have a real impact.
And how can people donate?
Yeah, so on our website, you can go to our website. There's multiple donate links on our website. There's also, if you want to send a check, our hard address is there. You can walk it in. You can, as I said, aggregate it. Some people's employers match. Some people know people with a lot of money who maybe don't know about immigration. We do come out and speak. We have events. We have a gala. I do think this is a moment where we're living, where people really want to do something to send a signal that they're not a part of the direction that President Trump is taking us as it relates to immigrants and refugees. And we're honored with any donation, volunteer activity, or activism that people can take to help reorient the direction that we're headed. So any and all of the above.
Your volunteer opportunities, are you looking for particular skill sets, or what kind of volunteer options do you have?
So on our website, we have a link for volunteering, and we've got some great people here who've revised that. So we're really asking you, what are your special skills? We are a nonprofit. Even though we've grown, we still have needs from volunteer lawyers on sort of that professional skill side, so certainly volunteer lawyers. We have a very accomplished pro bono program where we take non-immigration attorneys and plug them into the types of cases that are a good fit for pro bono. But we also have people who do filing work for us, people who work on our website, people who take photographs for us, people who are willing to answer the phone. Language skills, the ability to interpret, people who can speak a language other than English and interpret. A lot of our volunteer attorneys don't speak a second language, and so you really can add an extreme amount of value to an attorney who might be interviewing a person in Somali or in Oromo, in a language that could never be facilitated without that volunteer interpreter. So we really ask you to tell us what your skills are, and hopefully we can find a place for you.
Questions coming in?
No. If anybody has a question that's watching, be sure to comment below, and if we see them, we can certainly answer them. If you have questions later on, we can always try to get you connected. If you're watching this after our live taping.
Why don't we continue a little bit more while we're waiting for questions to roll in? Who would like to project a little bit about what's going to happen with the latest unfurling of executive orders and how the courts might respond to this latest?
Yeah, I think I can respond to that. I don't know if you want to talk to Zamzam about the community, but I've never been prouder to be a lawyer than I have been over the last 35 days. And, most people don't have warm, fuzzy feelings about lawyers, sometimes for good reasons. But the ability of the law to be a check against what we now know the courts have confirmed to be an unconstitutional order, I think is a shining moment for our profession. I'm honored to be a part of that. I've been honored to work with the Attorney General. Been honored to use the case of a 4-year-old girl, one of the most sort of vulnerable persons on the planet. I mean, think about it. A world away, barred by the most powerful individual on the planet, who tells her story, and this story of trying to reunite a mother and child. And suddenly, that story and that story and its representation for everybody caught in that moment is on the front page of the Washington Post. It was the photograph of her in her mom's arms holding a teddy bear was cited in a congressional oversight hearing when Secretary Kelly first appeared to try to explain the refugee travel ban. And, Mushkat, a 4-year-old girl, helped stop the order through the power of law, through the power of strategic advocacy, and through the countless hours of really dedicated servants to the law, to the Constitution, and to certainly a vision of America that I hope most people agree with. So we are not only committed, but we are engaged. We are assuming that the intentions that underscored the executive order in the first place, that are clearly documented in the legal filings by the Minnesota Attorney General about banning Muslims, we think that will still be the intent of the new order. And to the extent that this is discrimination based on religion, there will be continuing litigation. We don't know what that new order looks like, but we certainly will be examining it, and we are preparing, if need be, to use every tool in our toolbox to try to make sure that people who've been waiting for years still have a chance to reunite with their families.
And it looks like we did have one question come in from Christina. She wants to know if you take non-monetary donations for families that come to you, so such as food, gift cards, clothing, school supplies, toys, that
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Great question. Just because of who we are and the work that we do not. We don't have the capacity to take those kinds of donations. I would recommend places like the International Institute or Lutheran Social Services. So there's a whole group of Minnesota nonprofits that do that direct resettlement as soon as people are getting off the planes, and they have been getting a lot of donations. It's a beautiful way to also support families. So those are some other options. People can call us if they're not sure where to make those donations. Yeah, great question.
Excellent. Well, I don't know if you have your gala information as a closing pitch, but we
Yeah.
could certainly, if you have that info, feel free to share it. Otherwise, we could put that on our website.
Yeah, we're still finalizing plans for our 2017 gala, so we can't share that right now. We'd love for people to stay engaged, like I said, through our Facebook, through our website, through Twitter. The hope, of course, is that we can turn the corner on some of these issues. We're also very realistic. What's being put in place is likely to be a long-term effort. The ability to defend thousands of people and to, at the same time, try to change public policy is something we hope that your followers will sign up for and be a part of, not just over the next couple of weeks or months, but until we're able to turn these corners. So there will be plenty of opportunities. Don't be intimidated by the issues. To the extent you can, expand your universe, connect with people who you can have an impact on, and make those daily calls. That's something very tangible. Show up to town hall meetings. Be a voice of somebody who comes in prepared to talk about facts about immigrants, the facts about refugees, and the fact that we need them. All of that information you can find on our website and our Facebook page. And we're just thrilled to partner with you guys. We're really, really grateful. Thanks for all your support.
We're grateful for the work that you do, that you've been doing all these years and that you continue to do.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, everybody, for watching, and thank you to all of you for participating and taking time out of your busy day to meet with us. So we'll be sure to follow up this video with a post with your website and a tag to your Facebook and your Twitter, and then we'll stay in touch and keep up all of the great work. As you guys heard here, your calls really do matter, so do everything that you can to support as we move forward. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, bye-bye.